Hey, it's the introduction video for Out There Screaming, an anthology of new black horror edited by Jordan Peele. Let's take some notes. The first question I've got in your Cornell notes is, why did Jordan Peele edit an anthology of short stories? He wrote an introduction in the beginning of the text, and I do want you to read it. It's only a couple of pages long, and he talks about what he's trying to do here, and he also likens it to what he was trying to do when he wrote his most famous film, Get Out, for which, by the way, he won an Oscar. He was the first black person to win an Oscar for writing a screenplay by winning that award. And that movie, Get Out, along with Us and Nope, the three movies that he wrote, directed, and produced, are in all kinds of lists of, the best 21st century films so far. Jordan Peele is a highly acclaimed filmmaker for those, and I think probably the biggest name in the horror genre right now. So it makes sense that he is interested also in writing that is in the horror genre, in this case, short stories. In the introduction, he mentions that he views horror as catharsis through entertainment. He says it's a way to work through your deepest pain and fear. Now, I have to remind you about catharsis. Catharsis, we learned about way back at the beginning of the year when we read Medea by Euripides, right? Catharsis is the moment that the audience member feels what the characters on stage are feeling, right? And they are moved emotionally, and it's this kind of purging, right, of fear and anger and all of our sort of most problematic feelings as human beings. And it allows us to, comes from Aristotle, right? Aristotle talked about this in Ars Poetica. I'm just reminding you these things from first semester, that it's what allows, the regular folks to do their regular things by, getting some of those emotions out at the theater. So it's fun for me to see that Jordan Peele thinks that horror does the same thing. It's our modern day means of catharsis, right? But he makes the point in the introduction that this wasn't always possible for Black people because the stories weren't being told. Horror genre typically, before Jordan Peele, really, we didn't see a lot of horror stories told by and about African Americans. And so he makes that point in his introduction. He also said in an interview with a journalist from The Guardian that this collection was a chance to commission the very best Black authors in fiction. And he hoped that when prompted to create a personalized nightmare, their monsters might be representative of some previously unnamed truths. What you get are stories that feel like they couldn't or wouldn't have been told a few years ago. So what he's doing is something very new. It's very revolutionary in a sense. We haven't seen these kinds of stories told, or certainly not in with the level of fame and just readership that this book is now allowing. And it's really because of his name, right? Because the dude is so famous. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that he's using his fame to help some authors get their names out too. And the authors who are in the anthology, and an anthology too is just a collection of something, right? But this collection of short stories has some names that are well known, and some that are not. And so that'll be fun for you guys, I think, to explore all of these new authors and maybe find some that you like and that you want to pursue reading about. Okay, moving on. How does this text connect with Men We Reaped? It's a lot different, right? Because Men We Reaped is a true story. It's nonfiction. It's a memoir. It's one person's voice telling one story, and it's realistic fiction, right? Or excuse me, it's realistic. It's not fiction. It is nonfiction. Out There Screaming, on the other hand, is a collection of short stories that are all fiction, and some of them feel realistic. I mean, at moments, all of them will feel realistic, but of course, they're in the horror genre, so they go way beyond realism and are designed to really make us frightened, to make us, feel that horror and dread that the characters are feeling. So there are a lot of differences, but the key similarities we're going to focus on are themes, right? The first is coming of age in the margins. I think most of the stories are not about kids growing up, though, so we're going to reframe this theme a little bit by focusing on this part, recentering marginalized voices, right? So recentering marginalized voices, meaning that, we're looking at voices of people who have been pushed to the periphery of their worlds. They have been pushed out and ignored. And these stories all take those voices and put them right in the middle of the action. And so as you are reading, think about how, how the story focusing on recentering a voice that hadn't been heard before affects what's going on in the story and affects the reader. The second theme, narrative as a quest for freedom and understanding. For this one, we're looking at how these stories, allow characters to become free or to understand something that they previously didn't understand. So I think in this one, for the stories in this book, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think as we read them, but I think that, there's always a shocking moment, right, in a horror story. And so what will be interesting to see, I think, is how the moment of shock is also a moment of understanding, and how the narrative itself works to communicate some kind of understanding for the character or the reader. And each story's different, so we'll have to just kind of work on this together as we go through them. The third theme, of course, is identity as choice, and this theme is focusing on the idea that individuals create their own identity, that they have the agency to decide who they want to be and how they want to be perceived by others. And this theme also focuses on, resisting the labels and stereotypes imposed on you. And for me, this is the clearest one in these stories. Watch for how the characters are really resisting labels, stereotypes, and taking using their agency to become who they want to become. They do it in all kinds of different ways in these stories. What's the plan for reading this text? Well, I've divided it into 3 big chunks of reading. You're going to read 6 or 7 stories for each chunk. And then and work with each chunk as such. At the end of each reading, well, as you're reading, you'll be doing some during reading notes, as always. There's aspire to do and should do notes, and then there's a must do discussion at the end of each of the big 3 chunks. So 3 discussions. There's a mid-unit summative assessment that's worth 50 points. And then at the end, you're going to be writing another in-class timed essay. And this time it's a comparative essay. And so we will be writing about both Men We Reaped and at least one story from Out There Screaming. And I've got a lot of good strategies for you, and we'll do some review too, you know, once we get there to remind us about Men We Reaped before we write that essay. But that is the plan for the end of the unit. And welcome to this unit. I'm really excited to see what you guys think of these stories. Let's get reading some scary stories.